The velvet box felt cold in Adela's hands, a stark contrast to the warmth she'd felt just this morning, her palm resting on the gentle curve of her pregnant belly. Inside sat a Patek Philippe watch, its face a constellation of gears and sapphires, a gift for her husband Dermot's 40th birthday. It was a symbol of their 5 years together, of the empire they had built, of the child they were about to welcome. But now, parked across the street from a glittering downtown penthouse he didn't own, the watch felt like a relic from another life. A life that had ended an hour ago with a single, anonymous text message. Adela Adler and Dermot Pierce were the city's golden couple. Their story was a modern fairy tale, spun from architectural blueprints and ruthless acquisitions. Adela, the daughter of a celebrated but financially modest architect, was a visionary in her own right. She saw beauty in steel and glass, poetry in load-bearing walls. Dermot, a man who had clawed his way up from nothing, saw opportunity. He built Pierce Global into a real estate behemoth, and when he met Adela at a gallery opening, he saw his masterpiece. He pursued her with the same relentless focus he applied to a hostile takeover. He didn't just send flowers. He bought the entire floral shop for the day and had its contents delivered to her small apartment. He didn't just praise her designs. He funded one of her nonprofit community projects, building a sleek, beautiful library in a forgotten neighborhood. He was charming, powerful, and to Adela, he seemed to see not just the woman she was, but the woman she wanted to be. Their wedding was an event, their life a curated collection of magazine-worthy moments. They lived in a sprawling, minimalist mansion Adela herself had designed, a house of clean lines and vast windows overlooking the city. It was a perfect house. Sometimes late at night, when the silence was too loud, Adela felt it was too perfect, like a showroom no one was supposed to live in. The last year had brought a subtle shift. Dermot was more distant, his phone perpetually glued to his hand, angled away from her. Business trips became more frequent, his explanations for late nights vaguer. He'd blame the stress of a new acquisition or a difficult negotiation in an overseas market. Adela, trusting and deeply in love, accepted it. She was busy herself, overseeing the final design stages of Pierce Global's new flagship project, the Summit Tower, and navigating the thrilling, exhausting first trimester of her pregnancy. The baby was supposed to be their anchor, the final, perfect piece of their perfect life. When she told him, Dermot's reaction was a flash of something she couldn't decipher. Not quite joy, not quite fear, but something closer to shock, as if he'd just been presented with an unexpected variable in a complex equation. He recovered quickly, of course, kissing her, whispering about nurseries and dynasties. But the memory of that initial flicker of something else lingered. Dermot's 40th birthday was supposed to be a grand affair, a gala for 500 of the city's elite, but a week ago, he'd canceled it. "Sweetheart, with the final push on the Summit Tower, I just can't," he'd said, massaging her shoulders as she stood by the kitchen island. "It feels wrong to be celebrating when we're on the verge of the biggest deal of our lives. Let's just you and I have a quiet dinner. Just us. It's all I want." Adela had felt a pang of disappointment, but then a wave of love. How thoughtful, how focused. She agreed immediately, touched by his apparent devotion to their shared future. She spent the next week planning the perfect quiet dinner, arranging for his favorite chef to cook for them at home, and securing the Patek Philippe Grandmaster chime he'd once admired in a Geneva storefront. It cost a fortune, but nothing was too much for the father of her child, the love of her life. The day of his birthday, he'd kissed her goodbye, his suit smelling of expensive cologne and ambition. "I have to close the financing for the tower expansion this afternoon. It's a killer, but I'll be home by 8. Don't you lift a finger until I get there." At 6 p.m., as she was arranging a bouquet of his favorite white tulips, her phone buzzed. An unknown number, just a short, brutal message. "If you want to see how your husband is really celebrating his birthday, go to the Elysian Tower penthouse. He's the one popping the champagne." Beneath it was a photo. Dermot, his arm slung casually around the waist of a stunning brunette in a backless red dress. They were laughing, bathed in the warm glow of a setting sun, the city skyline spread out behind them. Adela didn't recognize the woman, but she recognized the look in Dermot's eyes. It was the same look he had given her on their first date, a look of conquest and pure, undiluted desire. Her world tilted on its axis. Her first instinct was denial, a prank, a doctored photo, a business meeting. But her heart knew better. The secrecy, the canceled party, the late nights, it all clicked into place with the sickening finality of a lock. Her hands shaking, she opened the car tracking app on her phone, the one they used for security. Dermot's car wasn't at his office. It was parked in the private garage of the Elysian Tower, a new, obscenely luxurious residential building he had no business being in. She didn't know what drove her, a need to see it with her own eyes, a desperate, foolish hope that it was all a mistake. She grabbed her coat, the velvet watch box still clutched in her hand, and drove. And now she was here, watching the lights of the penthouse blaze against the twilight sky, a beacon of her own destruction. She could see silhouettes moving against the floor-to-ceiling windows. Music, faint and thumping, bled into the night air. It wasn't a business meeting, it was a party. His party, and she was the only one who hadn't been invited. The cold of the leather seat seeped through Adela's clothes, but she barely felt it. Her entire being was focused on the rectangle of light 50 stories above the street. The Elysian Tower was one of Pierce Global's recent acquisitions, a jewel in Dermot's crown. The irony was a bitter pill. He was using her own husband's success, their shared success, as the stage for his betrayal. Her mind, usually a precise instrument of angles and measurements, was a maelstrom of raw, jagged emotions. She wanted to storm the lobby, ride the elevator up, and confront him, to scream, to cry, to throw the obscenely expensive watch at his smiling, treacherous face. But her body wouldn't move. Her feet felt like lead. Her hands were fused to the steering wheel. A primal instinct for self-preservation, perhaps for the preservation of the tiny, innocent life within her, kept her rooted in place. She was an architect of grand structures, yet her own foundation had just been reduced to rubble. With a trembling finger, she pulled out her phone and opened a social media app. She typed in the name of a popular city gossip blogger. It didn't take long. The blogger was already posting live stories from an exclusive, secret birthday bash for a certain real estate titan. The username of the brunette from the photo was tagged in a post. Katrina Belmont. Adela clicked on the profile. It was public. Katrina Belmont was a model, an influencer, a woman whose entire existence seemed to be a series of professionally lit moments in exotic locations. Her feed was a tapestry of yachts, designer clothes, and five-star resorts. A few scrolls down, Adela saw a photo from 3 months ago, Katrina on a balcony in Monaco. The balcony of the hotel suite Dermot had told Adela he was staying in for a solo business trip. The sickness in Adela's stomach intensified, a toxic cocktail of grief and rage. Her profile was a roadmap of Dermot's lies, a ski trip to Aspen during his investor summit in Denver, a weekend in a Tuscan villa during his board retreat in Frankfurt. He hadn't even bothered to be creative. Returning to the live stories, Adela watched the party unfold in fragmented 10-second bursts. There was Katrina, raising a champagne flute, her red dress clinging to her like a second skin. She was wearing a necklace, a cascade of diamonds that glittered under the recessed lighting. Adela's breath hitched. She knew that necklace. Dermot had given it to her for their 3rd anniversary. She hadn't worn it in months, preferring a simpler style. It had been sitting in their safe. Or it was supposed to be. The camera panned. There was Gideon Shaw, Dermot's best friend and COO, laughing and clapping someone on the back. Gideon, who had been over for dinner just last week, asking about the baby's nursery and telling Adela she was glowing. The betrayal cut deeper, 1,000 tiny stabs from all directions. Were they all in on it? Did their whole circle of friends know she was playing the fool? And then, the centerpiece of the spectacle. Dermot. He stood in the middle of the room, looking every bit the king in his castle. He wasn't wearing the custom suit he'd left the house in, but a more casual, open-collared shirt that made him look younger, freer. Katrina sidled up to him, her hand possessively on his chest. She whispered something in his ear, and he threw his head back and laughed. It was a full-throated, unrestrained laugh that Adela hadn't heard in years. With her, his laughter had become muted, tired. Someone brought out a cake, a multi-tiered confection blazing with candles. As the crowd began to sing Happy Birthday, Katrina silenced them with a gesture. She leaned in, her lips brushing his, and whispered for only him to hear, before taking his hand and placing it on her own flat, toned stomach. It was a deliberate theatrical gesture, a promise, a replacement. That was the moment Adela shattered. It wasn't a loud, violent break, but a silent, internal implosion. The tears that had been threatening finally fell, hot and silent, tracing paths down her cold cheeks. She was watching a preview of her own erasure. The life she was carrying, the child that was a testament to their love and commitment, was being mocked by that single empty gesture. Katrina was offering him a future without complication, without the weight of a shared history, without a wife who knew his tells and saw the cracks in his facade. She finally understood the look in his eyes when she told him she was pregnant. It wasn't shock, it was terror. He was trapped. The baby, her baby, was a cage, and Katrina was the key to his escape. A wave of nausea and dizziness washed over her. The hand resting on her belly became a shield. Suddenly, storming up there felt like the weakest thing she could do. Giving him the satisfaction of her tears, of a public scene, would be handing him the victory. He would paint her as the hysterical pregnant wife. He would be the victim. No. Her grief, sharp and blinding, began to cool, crystallizing into something hard and clear. It was a diamond forged under immense pressure. It was resolve. She looked from the laughing faces in the penthouse down to the velvet box on the passenger seat. The watch inside, with its intricate, perfect mechanism, was a lie. Their life was a lie, but the life inside her was real. The love she felt for that unborn child was the only real thing left. She would not be erased. She would not be a victim in his story. Adela put the car in drive. She didn't look back at the glittering tower. She drove away from the wreckage of her marriage, not with a plan for revenge, but with the first glimmer of a plan for survival. The architect in her mind, the part of her that understood structure and stress points, began to wake up. Every empire has a weak foundation, and she knew exactly where Dermot had laid his. The drive home was a study in surreal detachment. The familiar streets of their affluent neighborhood seemed alien, the perfectly manicured lawns and stately homes like a set for a play in which she no longer had a part. When she walked into their cavernous house, the silence was absolute. The white tulips she had arranged now seemed funereal. The tantalizing aromas from the kitchen, where a private chef was preparing Dermot's favorite meal, were nauseating. She walked straight to the kitchen. The chef, a portly man named Antoine, looked up from a simmering pan. "Mrs. Pierce, you are back. Monsieur Pierce is not with you?" "There's been a change of plans, Antoine," Adela said, her voice eerily calm. "Mr. Pierce has been detained. A last-minute emergency. You and your staff can pack up. Please bill me for the full evening." The chef opened his mouth to protest, but something in her eyes, a chilling emptiness he'd never seen before, stopped him. He simply nodded. "Of course, Mrs. Pierce." Adela retreated to her home office, a space she had designed with a glass wall overlooking a Japanese garden. She sat at her drafting table, the tools of her trade laid out in perfect order beside her. For a moment, she just breathed, focusing on the rhythmic rise and fall of her chest, a conscious effort to keep from flying apart. Crying was a luxury she couldn't afford. Hysteria was a weapon he would use against her. What she needed now was structure, a blueprint. Dermot arrived home just after 1 a.m. Adela was waiting for him, sitting in a stark armchair in their darkened living room, a single lamp casting long shadows on the wall. He stumbled in, reeking of champagne and a woman's perfume that wasn't hers. "Adela! God, you scared me! What are you doing sitting in the dark?" He slurred slightly, fumbling with his jacket. "I was waiting for you," she said, her voice flat. "How was the financing meeting?" He froze, his back to her. He was a good liar, but he was also drunk. "It was brutal, a real grind. These bankers, they just suck the life out of you. I'm exhausted." He turned, forcing a weary smile. "I'm so sorry I'm late, sweetheart. I tried to call. My battery must have died." He was lying so easily, so pathologically. The man she had married was gone. In his place stood a stranger, a hollow man propped up by deceit. "Your phone didn't die, Dermot," she said, her gaze unwavering. "And you weren't with bankers." A flicker of panic crossed his face, quickly replaced by anger, the classic defense of the guilty. "What the hell is that supposed to mean? I've been busting my ass for this family, for our future, and I come home to an interrogation?" "Our future?" Adela let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Is that what you call it? I know where you were. I know about the party. I know about Katrina Belmont." The name landed in the silent room like a grenade. All the color drained from Dermot's face. He sank onto the edge of the sofa opposite her, the drunken bravado evaporating, leaving behind a pathetic, cornered man. "Annie, listen. It's not what you think," he began, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. "She means nothing. It was a mistake, a stupid, meaningless mistake. The party was thrown for me by some business associates. I didn't even want to go." Adela held up a hand, silencing him. Don't you dare insult my intelligence by trying to lie your way out of this." "Not now. I saw you, Dermot. I saw her wearing my necklace. I saw you laughing with our friends while I was here, waiting for you." He buried his face in his hands. "I'm sorry. God, I am so sorry. I'll end it. I'll end it tonight. It's over. It's you I love. You and the baby. We can fix this." She looked at him, truly looked at him, and felt nothing but a vast, cold emptiness. The love had been burned out of her, leaving only ashes. "No, we can't," she said softly. "You didn't just make a mistake. You built a second life on a foundation of lies. And I, of all people, know that a faulty foundation means the entire structure must come down." She stood up and walked out of the room, leaving him sitting in the shadows. She went upstairs, not to their shared bedroom, but to a guest suite at the far end of the house, locking the door behind her. Her first call was to her oldest friend, Zoe Chen. Zoe was a shark, one of the most feared divorce attorneys in the city. Adela woke her up, and in a steady, emotionless voice, relayed the events of the evening. Zoe listened without interruption. When Adela was done, there was a moment of silence, and then Zoe's voice, sharp and clear. "Okay. First, are you and the baby safe? He didn't get violent?" "No, he's just pathetic." "Good. Second, do not talk to him again. Not about this. No pleading, no negotiating. From this moment on, I talk for you. Third, and this is the most important, we don't just cry, Adela. We document." "What do you mean?" "The prenuptial agreement you signed is ironclad, but it has a punitive infidelity clause. It was your father's one insistence. If we can prove sustained and egregious marital misconduct, the asset division shifts dramatically in your favor. His little party is a good start, but a judge might see it as a one-time slip. You said you saw her social media? A trip to Monaco? And Aspen and Tuscany," Adela added, the pieces clicking into place. "All during his business trips." "Perfect," Zoe purred. "He's arrogant and sloppy. We need flight manifests, hotel receipts, credit card statements, anything that ties him to her on those dates. He's hidden it, but he's not smart enough to hide it from you. You know how his mind works. You know his systems. I'll start the legal paperwork. You start the excavation. Dig, Adela. Dig like our lives depend on it. Because for you and your child, they do." Hanging up the phone, Adela felt the first true spark of power return to her. Zoe was right. This wasn't just about a broken heart. This was about her future, her child's security, and taking back what was hers. Dermot had mistaken her kindness for weakness. He thought she was just a dreamer who designed pretty buildings. He had forgotten that she was also the woman who understood, better than anyone, that to build something new, you first have to demolish what is rotten. And Dermot's empire was rotten to the core. The next few days were a masterclass in emotional compartmentalization. To the outside world and to a bewildered and groveling Dermot, Adela was a ghost. She moved through their home with a chilling placidity, speaking only when necessary, her answers clipped and devoid of warmth. She ate her meals alone in the guest suite, took long, solitary walks, and deflected all of Dermot's desperate apologies and pleas with a simple, impenetrable phrase. "My lawyer will be in touch." His panic was palpable. He sent flowers that she left to wilt in the hallway. He left pleading notes that she threw away unread. He was trying to manage the situation, to control the narrative, but for the first time in their relationship, she had taken the power from him by simply refusing to engage. Her true life began after he left for the office in the morning and before he came home at night. Her mission was to unearth the proof Zoe needed. She started where she was strongest, with structure and systems. Dermot was a man of habit and ego. He believed he was smarter than everyone else, which meant his digital security would be arrogant. His personal office in their home was her first target. It was protected by a keypad lock. She tried his birthday, their anniversary, his mother's birthday. All nothing. Then she paused, thinking not like a wife, but like an architect. The code for the main house security system was 2005, the year Pierce Global was founded. His private vault at the bank used the address of his first major acquisition. He didn't use sentiment, he used monuments to himself. She typed in the height in feet of the Summit Tower, their crowning achievement, 1250. The lock clicked open. The office was immaculate, all chrome and black leather. She went straight to his computer. It was password protected, of course, but she had watched him log in 100 times. It was a complex alphanumeric string, but his fingers always followed the same pattern, a quick, muscular dance on the keyboard. She closed her eyes, visualizing it. His first two initials, DP, the stock ticker for Pierce Global, PGI, and the closing price on the day it went public. DPPG I-42 or an 85, she typed it in. Access granted. A wave of triumph washed over her, cold and sharp. For years she had absorbed these details about him out of love. Now she would wield them as weapons. She spent hours sifting through files, looking for the travel records Zoe needed. He was clever. There were no direct purchases for flights or hotels with Katrina Belmont. He used a corporate concierge service and a Black American Express card, bearing personal expenses among legitimate business charges. It would take a forensic accountant months to untangle. They needed something more direct, a smoking gun. She moved from his computer to the physical office. He had a state-of-the-art filing system, but Dermot was old school in some ways. He liked to have hard copies of his most important deals. She ran her hands along the spines of the binders, each one a testament to his ambition. And then she saw it. A sleek, black, leather-bound ledger tucked away behind a row of architectural awards. It had no label. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She opened it. It wasn't a deal book. It was a private ledger. And on the first page, in Dermot's precise, angular handwriting, was the title, Project Nightingale. It was all there. A shadow company, Nightingale Holdings, LLC, registered in Delaware. A detailed breakdown of funds being systematically siphoned from Pierce Global's various construction projects. Small amounts, just under the threshold that would trigger an audit, disguised as consulting fees or material overages. Over the last 2 years, it amounted to more than $50 million. Her blood ran cold. This wasn't just an affair. This was grand larceny. He was stealing from his own company, their company. The ledger was meticulous. It tracked the flow of money from Pierce Global into Nightingale Holdings, and then out again. And the expenditures told a chilling story. There was the down payment on a waterfront villa in Lake Como, Italy, the purchase of a rare vintage sports car, a wire transfer to a private jewelry designer in Antwerp, and then the final devastating entries, a series of payments to a high-end fertility clinic in Switzerland, under the name K. Belmont, followed by a wire transfer for the full purchase of a palatial, ultra-modern home in a private, gated community in California, the deed for which was already held in a trust for Katrina Belmont in future issue. Adela had to sit down, the air knocked from her lungs. It all made sense now. His panic about her pregnancy, Katrina's triumphant hand on her own stomach at the party. He wasn't just having an affair, he was building a new life. He was funding it with stolen money and planning a new family, a replacement for the one he was about to discard. Project Nightingale wasn't just a slush fund, it was the budget for her erasure. She took out her phone and, with hands that were surprisingly steady, began to photograph every single page of the ledger. Each entry was a nail in his coffin. The hotel folios, the wire transfers, the deeds. This went far beyond the infidelity clause in their prenup. This was criminal. This was leverage on a scale she had never imagined. As she photographed the last page, she heard the sound of Dermot's car in the driveway. He was home early. Panic flared in her chest. She quickly placed the ledger exactly where she had found it, logged out of the computer, and slipped out of the office. Her phone clutched in her hand like a lifeline. She reset the door code, her mind racing. She had the smoking gun. In fact, she had an entire arsenal. The question was no longer how she would survive this. The question was how she would bring his entire corrupt world crashing down around him. And as she walked back to her solitary room, a new blueprint began to form in her mind. A design not of steel and glass, but of meticulously planned, ruthlessly executed justice. The discovery of Project Nightingale shifted Adela's strategy from defense to offense. This was no longer a messy divorce. It was a corporate coup. But she couldn't do it alone. She needed allies, people on the inside who valued the integrity of Pierce Global more than their loyalty to its corrupt CEO. Her first thought was Gideon Shaw, Dermot's COO and supposed best friend. She'd seen him at the party, laughing, complicit. But Gideon had always been the more cautious of the two, the pragmatist to Dermot's reckless visionary. Adela had known him for years and had always sensed a core of decency beneath his corporate ambition. She decided to test the waters. She invited him for coffee at a neutral, discreet hotel cafe downtown. He arrived looking wary, his eyes shadowed with guilt. "Adela," he began, his voice low. "I am so sorry. I wanted to call you. I don't know what to say. Dermot, he's out of control?" She finished for him, her tone cool and even. She took a sip of her tea, watching him over the rim of the cup. "Gideon, I didn't ask you here for an apology. I asked you here to talk about the company." He looked relieved and confused. "The company? Everything is fine. The Summit Tower is ahead of schedule. The financing for the expansion is locked." "Is it?" she asked, letting the question hang in the air. "Because I have reason to believe that Dermot has been compromising the company's finances for his own personal gain. That he's been embezzling funds on a massive scale." Gideon's face went pale. He shifted in his seat, avoiding her gaze. "That's a very serious accusation, Adela. You can't just... You'd need proof." "I have it," she said simply. "I know about Nightingale Holdings." The name struck him like a physical blow. He flinched, his carefully constructed composure cracking. For a long moment he said nothing, just stared into his untouched cup of coffee. He knew. Of course he knew. "How much do you know?" he finally whispered. "I know it's a shell corporation used to funnel millions out of Pierce Global. I know it's funding a new life for him and Katrina Belmont. And I suspect that some of the financial documents you signed off on in the last 2 years might not stand up to scrutiny from the SEC. It was a bluff, but a calculated one. As COO, Gideon's signature would be on everything." He closed his eyes, the weight of his complicity settling on him. "I told him it was too risky," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "I told him he was going to burn everything to the ground. He wouldn't listen. He said it was his company, his money." "It's not just his company," Adela countered, her voice hardening. "It belongs to the shareholders. It belongs to the employees whose livelihoods depend on it. It was built on my father's legacy." She leaned forward, her gaze intense. "You have a choice, Gideon. You can go down with the ship because, believe me, it is sinking. Or you can help me save the company from its own CEO. You can help me do the right thing." She could see the war raging within him. Loyalty versus self-preservation, fear versus conscience. She left him with that choice, paying the bill and walking out of the cafe without another word. She had planted the seed of doubt. Now she had to see if it would grow. Her next move was less of a gamble and more of a strategic investment. She requested a meeting with Albert Peterson, the oldest and most respected member of the Pierce Global Board of Directors. Peterson was a titan of old world industry, a man who had been a close friend and admirer of Adela's father. He had been skeptical of Dermot's aggressive expansion tactics from the start, but was often outvoted by the younger, more sycophantic board members. They met in the hushed, wood-paneled library of his private club. Adela didn't begin with accusations. She began with respect. She spoke of her father's vision for the company, a vision of creating lasting community value, not just shareholder profit. She spoke of her own pride in projects like the Summit Tower. Peterson listened patiently, his shrewd, intelligent eyes studying her. "You did not ask for this meeting to reminisce, Adela," he said kindly. "Tell me what's wrong." This time she didn't hold back. She laid out the entire story, from the personal betrayal to the shocking discovery of Project Nightingale. She didn't show him the photos of the ledger, not yet. She needed his trust first. When she finished, Peterson was silent for a full minute, his fingers steepled under his chin. "I am not surprised," he said finally, his voice heavy with disappointment. "I have seen this kind of rot before. Arrogance is a cancer in a leader. It makes them believe they are the company, and the rules no longer apply." He looked at her, his expression turning from grim to determined. "Your father was a man of impeccable integrity. You are his daughter. What do you need from me?" "When the time comes," Adela said, a wave of relief washing over her, "I will need a special meeting of the board, and I will need someone to call for a vote of no confidence. I will provide irrefutable proof to support it." "Consider it done," Peterson said without hesitation. "Just tell me when." Meanwhile, Dermot's behavior grew more erratic. Sensing that his apologies were failing, he switched tactics to veiled threats about her financial future and her fitness as a mother. Simultaneously, Katrina Belmont grew bolder. She began posting photos on her social media that were thinly veiled provocations. A shot of her wrist with a new diamond bracelet Adela recognized. A picture of her view from a balcony that was unmistakably in the Elysian Tower penthouse, with the caption, "Loving my new nest." They thought she was a weak, emotional woman who would eventually break. They didn't realize they were dealing with an architect who was patiently waiting for the perfect moment to detonate the charges she had so carefully placed at the base of their world. The stage was being set. The actors were in place. All she needed was the right venue for the final act, and she knew exactly where it would be. The perfect venue presented itself, gift-wrapped in irony. Pierce Global was hosting a black-tie gala to celebrate the topping out of the Summit Tower, the moment when the final structural beam is raised into place. It was a major milestone, a triumphant moment for the company. It was also Adela's signature project, a building she had poured her heart and soul into for the past 3 years. Dermot, in a desperate attempt at a public reconciliation, insisted she attend as his wife and the project's lead architect. "We need to present a united front, Annie," he'd pleaded, standing in the doorway of her guest suite. "For the company. For us. Let people see we're fine. It's the most important night of my career. Of our careers." His words dripped with manipulative sentiment. But Adela saw only the perfect glittering trap. A room full of the city's most powerful people, the entire board of directors, key investors, and the press. It was a stage far grander than any courtroom. "I will be there," she said, her voice betraying no emotion. "I will not have you ruin the celebration of my greatest professional achievement." The relief that flooded his face was almost comical. He saw her agreement as a sign of surrender, a first step towards forgiving him. He had no idea he was personally inviting his own executioner to his coronation. In the week leading up to the gala, Adela worked with the quiet, furious efficiency of a master strategist. She met with Zoe to finalize the legal assault, timing the official filing of the divorce and the lawsuit against Dermot to drop the morning after the event. She met secretly with Albert Peterson, giving him a full encrypted copy of the Nightingale ledger. He was appalled, his resolve hardening into cold fury. He promised to have the votes he needed. She also received a clandestine call from Gideon Shaw. He sounded terrified but resolute. "I'm in," he said, his voice a strained whisper. "I've found more. He used company funds to bribe a zoning commissioner for the Elysian Tower deal. I have the wire confirmations. I'll back you up. I have to." Adela now had an inside witness. The case was hermetically sealed. The night of the gala, Adela took her time getting ready. She chose a dress not of mourning, but of power. It was a column of deep emerald silk, elegant and severe. It highlighted her pregnancy not as a vulnerability, but as a statement of her future. She wore her hair pulled back, and her only jewelry was a pair of simple diamond studs. When she descended the stairs, Dermot was waiting. looking relieved and handsome in his tuxedo. "You look breathtaking," he said, his voice thick with what he likely believed was genuine emotion. He tried to kiss her, but she turned her head so his lips met only air. She would not grant him even that small intimacy. The gala was held in a vast, unfinished space on the 50th floor of the Summit Tower. The raw concrete and exposed girders were dramatically lit, and floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the sparkling city. It was a testament to power and vision. Adela played her part perfectly. She smiled, shook hands with investors, and accepted congratulations on her stunning design. She stood by Dermot's side, a picture of wifely support, all while feeling the cold weight of the flash drive in her clutch purse. Dermot, basking in the glow of his success, was oblivious. He held her hand, paraded her around the room, using her presence to shore up his own image. The main event of the evening was a presentation, followed by a speech from the CEO. A massive screen dominated one wall. Dermot took the stage to thunderous applause. He spoke of vision, of legacy, of building the future. He thanked his team, the investors, and then he turned his gaze to Adela, a practiced, loving smile on his face. "And most of all," he said, his voice resonating with false sincerity, "I want to thank my brilliant wife, Adela, the heart and soul of this project. Her vision is the foundation on which all of this is built. She is my partner, my inspiration, and the mother of my child. Adela, this is our triumph." He gestured for her to join him on stage. The applause was deafening. This was his checkmate, he thought, forcing her to stand with him, to publicly endorse their fraudulent union. Adela walked onto the stage, her expression serene. She took the microphone he offered. The room fell silent, expecting a few gracious words of thanks. "Thank you, Dermot," she began, her voice clear and steady, amplified throughout the cavernous space. "You speak of foundations, and I agree, a strong foundation is everything. It must be built on honesty, integrity, and transparency. Unfortunately, the foundation of Pierce Global is no longer sound." A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. Dermot's smile faltered. He tried to subtly reach for the microphone, but Adela took a step away. "While we celebrate the construction of this beautiful tower," she continued, her voice gaining strength, "our CEO has been busy with a side project, a project of deconstruction, a project designed to defraud this company, its shareholders, and its employees." She turned to the tech booth. "Please run the file labeled Project Nightingale." Before Dermot could react, the huge screen behind them flickered. The Pierce Global logo was replaced by the first page of the Black Ledger. A collective gasp went through the room. Adela's voice was the calm, cutting narration over the damning evidence. "This is Project Nightingale," she announced as she clicked through the slides she had prepared. "A shell corporation, Nightingale Holdings, used by Dermot Pierce to embezzle over $50 million from this company." Slide after slide appeared on the screen. Bank statements, wire transfers to offshore accounts, the deed to the villa in Lake Como, photos of Dermot and Katrina Belmont in Monaco, in Aspen, all time-stamped. Dermot stood frozen, his face a mask of horror and disbelief. The blood had drained from it, leaving him looking pale and ghastly under the stage lights. "He used our money to fund his affair," Adela's voice rang out, merciless and true. "He used our money to buy jewelry for his mistress, including the necklace she is wearing tonight." She pointed a single steady finger towards the crowd, where Katrina Belmont stood near the front, her face ashen, her hand instinctively going to the diamonds at her throat. All eyes swiveled to her. "And finally," Adela said, her voice dropping for the final devastating blow, "he used our money to attempt to build a new life, paying for fertility treatments and a new home in California for his mistress, all while his pregnant wife planned for a nursery at home." The final slide was a split screen, the deed to the California house in Katrina's name on one side, and a beautiful architectural rendering Adela had made of their baby's nursery on the other. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the sound of Dermot's ragged breathing. His empire, his reputation, his entire world had been demolished in less than 5 minutes, in front of everyone who mattered. His triumph had become his tomb. The final slide hung in the air, a diptych of betrayal and hope. For a full 10 seconds, the vast, dramatically lit space was plunged into a silence, so profound it was like a physical pressure, absorbing all sound, all breath. The hundreds of guests stood like statues, their faces a gallery of disbelief. Adela could see every detail from the stage. The horrified gasp of a prominent investor, the wide, stunned eyes of a society columnist, the flash of a dozen phone screens switching to video record. And she saw Katrina Belmont, frozen in the crowd, a ghastly parody of a deer in the headlights, her hand clutching the diamond necklace as if it were a talisman that had just failed her. The silence was shattered by Dermot. A raw, guttural roar of pure fury erupted from his chest as he finally broke free from his paralysis. "Lies!" he bellowed, his voice cracking, the polished CEO persona stripped away to reveal something feral and desperate beneath. "She's a scorned, hysterical woman. This is slander. These are fabrications from a sick, vindictive mind." He lunged for the microphone in Adela's hand, his face a contorted mask of rage. But she didn't flinch. She simply held his gaze, her own expression a calm, desolate sea. In that moment, she felt a tiny, fluttering kick from within her, a secret affirmation, a reminder of the real, unshakable truth she was fighting for. Before Dermot's hand could reach her, a formidable figure stepped between them. Albert Peterson, his face carved from granite, placed a firm hand on Dermot's chest, stopping him cold. He was flanked by two other senior board members, their expressions equally grim. "That's enough, Dermot," Peterson's voice boomed, imbued with a lifetime of authority that cut through the chaos. The room fell silent once more, hanging on his every word. "I'm afraid the evidence is quite real. I have reviewed it myself. I'm calling an emergency session of the board, effective immediately." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a low, lethal tone for Dermot alone to hear. "I suggest you consult with your attorney. Your personal attorney." As if summoned by his words, two of the tower's senior security guards moved onto the stage, their presence large and immovable. They positioned themselves on either side of Dermot. The public humiliation was complete. His eyes, wild and searching, darted around the room, looking for an ally, a friendly face, but finding only condemnation and shock. His gaze finally settled on Adela, and the hatred in them was so potent it was almost a physical force. It was the look of a king dethroned, promising ruin. But looking back at him, she felt no fear, no flicker of her old love, not even pity. Only the cold, clean finality of a necessary amputation. As Dermot was being firmly but discreetly escorted from the stage, another figure stepped into the light. Gideon Shaw, his face pale and slick with sweat, walked directly to Peterson. He clutched a leather-bound folder to his chest like a shield. "Mr. Peterson." Gideon's voice was strained, but it carried in the silent room. This contains evidence of bribery and fraud related to the Elysian Tower Project Zoning Commission. I am prepared to give a full statement to the authorities and the SEC. I can't be a part of this any longer." It was a confession and a plea, a public act of severing his allegiance and perhaps saving himself. It was the final, devastating blow. The whispers in the crowd erupted into a roar of conversation. The gala was over. The reign of Dermot Pierce was over. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of controlled demolition. The media frenzy was relentless, but Adela remained cloistered, letting the evidence and her lawyer do the talking. She worked with Zoe, methodically providing testimony and documentation that sealed Dermot's fate. His high-priced legal team tried to paint her as unstable and vengeful, but the cold, hard facts of the Nightingale Ledger and Gideon's corroborating testimony were irrefutable. The board, under Peterson's unwavering leadership, voted unanimously to remove Dermot as CEO, stripping him of his titles and his power in a single, brutal meeting. The SEC investigation led to criminal charges. Faced with an unwinnable war on all fronts, Dermot pled guilty to embezzlement and wire fraud. His assets were frozen, his name became a toxic footnote in the city's business journals. Adela navigated the legal proceedings with the same precision she brought to her architectural work. When it came to the divorce settlement, Zoe had argued for a punitive sum, but Adela refused. "I don't want his money, Zoe. It's tainted," she had said, looking out the window of her lawyer's office. "I want the future he tried to steal." The settlement was structured accordingly. She secured a controlling interest in the restructured company, ensuring its legacy, her father's legacy, would continue. And she took full, unencumbered ownership of the house, the beautiful cage she had designed, which she now intended to make a home. 6 months later, Adela stood on the private terrace of her new office, the one she now occupied on the top floor of the summit tower. The autumn air was crisp and clean, carrying the distant sounds of the city below. The company had been reborn. After much debate, the board had agreed to her proposed name, the Adler Legacy Group, a tribute to the father who had started it all and the future she was now building. The sun was low in the sky, casting a warm, golden light across her face. She rested both hands on her belly, a perfect, heavy sphere that carried her daughter. She felt a strong, insistent kick and smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile that reached her eyes. "Easy, little one," she whispered. "You'll have plenty of room to move around soon." Her gaze drifted across the sprawling urban landscape. She could see the landmarks of her life laid out before her. The old library her father had designed, the sleek glass condo that had been her first solo projects, the distant glimmer of the Elysian Tower. A scar now, but a reminder. And now she stood at the pinnacle of the summit tower, a building born of her own vision. It was no longer a monument to his greed, but a testament to her resilience. She was no longer Adela Pierce, a name that felt like a costume she had once worn. She was Adela Adler, a name that felt like coming home. She had walked through the inferno of betrayal, not to emerge unscathed, but to be forged into someone tempered and whole. She had lost the illusion of a perfect marriage, but in its place she had found a profound and unshakable sense of self. This new life wasn't about revenge. Revenge was a fire that consumed everything. This was about reclamation. She was reclaiming her time, her talent, her name, and the right to build a life on a foundation of her own making, one of integrity, honesty, and a fierce, protective love for the child she was about to bring into the world. As the city lights began to twinkle on one by one, creating a new constellation at her feet, she knew with absolute certainty that this was a foundation that would never, ever crumble. Adela's story isn't just about betrayal. It's a powerful testament to the quiet strength that lies within us when our world falls apart. It's about a woman who refused to be a victim, who transformed her deepest pain into a blueprint for her own liberation. She didn't just expose a liar, she reclaimed her name, her career, and her future for herself and her child. Her journey reminds us that the most beautiful structures are often built on the ruins of what had to be torn down, and that our greatest power is not in avoiding the storm, but in learning how to build in the rain. If her journey from heartbreak to triumphant rebirth moved you, and if you believe in the power of resilience, please show your support. Your likes, shares, and subscriptions help us continue to bring powerful stories like this to light. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you won't miss our next video. Thank you for watching.